Hi, welcome back to Health Talk with the Pros. My name is Danny Reyes, your host, and today I'm have the pleasure to have one of my good friends, colleagues, Dr. Stephen Ali here with us, and he's going to be talking a little bit about mental health today, kind of just piggybacking off of our first episode where we talked about the body as a pyramid, where we talked about nutritional, the physical, and the mental side. And Dr. Stephen Ali here is going to be talking to us about little tips and tricks that we could do in our everyday lives, things that we've done with our athletes, things that he currently does with his athletes, and how we can implement this all into our regular lives, right? So, Dr. Ali, thank you very much for joining us today. I appreciate you.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I'm glad we're doing this. I think it's really important, and I think it's timely too. So, it's awesome.
Absolutely. Well, give us a little bit of an introduction. I know they know your name, but kind of give us a little background about you.
Yeah. So, as you already said, Dr. Stephen Alley. So went to University of Florida, did my doctorate degree there in counseling, with a specialty area in athlete development, specifically working with athletes throughout their career cycle. From there, I spent some time at different teams and different organizations, working in the NFL for a little bit, now the NBA in the college setting. So right now I currently work for the Philadelphia 76ers as a mental performance and player development manager. And so it's kind of like two positions kind of combined in one. The mental performance side is pretty self-explanatory. I kind of oversee the mental health program and some of the resources that we provide to our athletes and our staff. And then for the player development side is really the holistic, looking at the athlete as a whole, making sure that, yes, it's important that they're being successful on the court, but we also want to make sure that they're successful off the court. And that means taking, into account their personal growth and development, working with their families, their agents, and some of the important stakeholders in their lives too. So it's really an all-encompassing position. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's something that I take a lot of pride in, and something that I get a lot of fulfillment out of.
Absolutely. And when we tie this directly into athletics, right? In athletes specifically, competition is their job, right? Competition
Yep.
is everything that they do, and mental health is a huge, I want to say, part of that, of the competition side of things, right? Now, now you're with basketball, and give us some examples of kind of the mental health things that you've seen with your basketball players, and we'll then kind of tag it on to everyday life like us people. So
Yeah, I mean, I think I won't use any names or anything like that, but I think
absolutely.
everyone kind of deals with mental health, right? I think one of the biggest myths I often encounter people having is that for some reason, professional athletes at whatever level don't have these same issues, right? They see some of those big numbers that some of these guys are making. Granted, not every guy is making those kind of numbers, but it's kind of the assumption that everyone,
Mm-hmm.
as soon as you're in the NBA or in the G League, which I work very closely with as well, you're making a lot of money, which isn't entirely true. I mean, it's definitely, they're definitely get compensated pretty well, but they deal with things just like everybody else does, right? I mean, they have the same pressures as everybody else. They have the same needs as everybody else. It just looks a little bit different, right? So I think it's important for the public to really understand that. I think they're guys just like me and you know what I mean? And so like it's important to understand that they do have the same daily struggles and daily challenges that we all face. And so addressing those is important, because you can't compartmentalize everything, right? I know we both have bad days before, right? And then all of a sudden we're going to work is just harder, right? Whatever you're doing may take longer, or you have a quicker fuse with people, or whatever it might be. But so you can't always compartmentalize every single part of it. These athletes are really, really good at doing that, because that's what they do day in and day out. But they're still susceptible to the same things that we're susceptible to, right? So I think that's just kind of one of the biggest things I like to tell people when I have these one-on-one conversations. Just they're people too, so don't forget about that.
Exactly. And then the other mental health compartment or portion of this is the need for results in athletics. Having
Yeah.
worked with football practically my whole professional career, the results is the most important thing, right? It's getting the
Right.
win, it's making that first down. It's in basketball, it's getting that winning bucket, it's getting the pass block, whatever it may be. It's just so the results at the end of the day are what's the most important thing, and that weighs a lot on people, right?
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about in season, right? how do some of your basketball players just battle mental health and deal with mental health in season? And then we'll talk a little bit about the off season.
Yeah, I mean, I think for each player is going to look different. I mean, everyone has their own way of coping and dealing with the things that the pressures that come with their job, the pressure that, whether that's, performance pressure, whether that's societal pressure, whether that's, now social media pressure, right? I think everyone on the team probably deals with it their own way. And I think it's important to recognize that. I think, in season, guys are pretty focused on what the task is, right? Basketball is the main priority. And so like during the season, it's a long season. And, that's kind of the main thing that they focus on. And we try to help them as much as we can to be able to focus on those things, right? Helping them, assisting with their families, their agents, and, other people that are important to them, helping those parts of their life as well, just because, if your family's not doing well, that's going to bleed into the way you perform on the court, right? And so if something's going on in the world, last year we had a lot of different social issues that were going on, that affects the players directly, right? Because that's where they're coming from. That's where they grew up. That's where they live. That's where they have people that exist in those spaces. And so I think trying to help players in those spaces, just so that they are able to focus on what the main thing is, which is basketball, right? Like you said, it's a very, athletics is a very performance driven field. I mean, if you're not first, you're last, essentially. If you're not winning, then you're losing, right? And so I think everybody recognized that, and I think it's something to make sure that we're putting our athletes in the best possible position to be successful on the court and off the court as well, of course.
Absolutely. And then kind of piggybacking on the off the court thing, right? We got to the off season, and these athletes now are in a different mindset, right? They're not training 24/7. They're not traveling 24/7. They're not playing basketball 3, maybe sometimes 4 times a week, right? They're practicing, maybe a little bit throughout their off season, but it's nothing like the vigor of an actual in season. Talk to us a little bit about, some tips that you give your athletes or things that you've seen your own athletes do in the off season that helps with mental health. But that also kind of just helps them relax or get out of that competition mode, right? Because like I mentioned in the first episode, it's athletes have a switch, right? Once that switch goes on, it is game mode. They are a totally different person, and then right after that game, that switch turns off, and then they're back to being a normal person, right? They're not that superhero anymore, and then all of those types of things. So talk a little bit about the off season and what they do.
Yeah, well, I think the off season, again, I think the off season, people underestimate how much work actually goes in the off season. I think some athletes like, Damian Lillard recently kind of spoke about how he, trains himself for the off season so that the regular season comes easier. And so a lot of athletes are still training pretty hard during that time. But you're right. Like it is a very, like once someone steps on the court, that switches on. It's like, okay, the lights are on, time to go. Let's get this done. And so I think one of the things in the off season, that's when you can actually start building different mental performance skills, psychological skills, or whatever it might be, right? So implementing, some guys meditate, so that's something that they do regularly. And so like that's if an athlete wants to kind of incorporate that into their performance ritual, or their whatever they need to do to get ready for a game, that's kind of the best time to do it. So that's not so they can actually see how they can spend time working on it, and it's not negatively impacting something else when they change their routine or anything like that. Absolutely. And so during the off season is the time to kind of like start implementing things to really work on things that you don't have time to work on in the off season. And so a lot of times that's even spending time with their families, like that. You may not think of that as mental health or mental wellness, but that really is, right? Because during the season they're traveling so much that they don't really have time to spend quality time with their kids, their spouses, their family and friends and things like that. And so being able to kind of like step away from everything, the hustle and bustle, and step away from the lights for a little bit, and be able to spend time with their families and kind of do the things that they enjoy outside of basketball, I think provides them an opportunity to kind of recharge and kind of get ready back for the season again. But the offseason can also
go ahead, finish.
Yeah, just one last point. I think the offseason is also can be a really stressful time for a lot of players too, because especially in basketball, there's a lot of change that happens in the offseason. Like players are getting traded, players are either getting waived, some are moving overseas, some are, stop, finishing their careers and whatnot. And so that time is also a pretty stressful time too, because, a guy might not know if I'm going to be back here next year. Right. And so for your listeners, I would just challenge them to kind of think, if you go into work and, at the end of the calendar year, let's say December, not knowing if you're going to be back here in January. Right. I think that's the very, most guys deal with that on an annual basis, and even through the season. Right. We have the trade deadlines and things like that. But, the off season, that's when a lot of changes happen. So it's, they're uprooting their entire families. Like they're, moving from, Philadelphia to wherever it is. They're coming from, another team, wherever that is, and they're coming to Philadelphia. And so like, it's a very difficult transition period. And so I think that adjustment can also be, tough for a lot of people and their families.
Absolutely. No, that's huge. And you've mentioned family a few times, and, we'll touch on that as a support system later on. But, one of the key things that bounces off of me is when I was watching the NBA, the playoffs, when the NBA was in the bubble, right, in Orlando during the whole COVID season. A lot of families weren't allowed to be around their players. These players were in this bubble at a hotel and playing in one arena for a few months. And, finally towards the end, I remember, in the Eastern Conference Finals, I saw some of the family members for, I think it was the Celtics. The Celtics were playing the Heat, I think, in the Eastern Conference Finals when they were in the bubble, and you just saw that their families were around, and they were just different people. Like they had something to play for now. It wasn't just a couple of screens with virtual fans. It was their families are there, and it brought something out of them that you didn't see throughout the entire playoffs. Right? Yeah, there's still competition, there's still all of that, but they had something there, right? And like, we'll touch on that, how support systems really help out with mental health and all that, but you could just see that something changed, right? And it was the fact that they had loved ones there, their families, their kids, their spouses, whoever it may be, their parents, although it was maybe 2 or 3, but it doesn't matter. They had someone
exactly.
That was enough. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's something that was huge.
Yeah. I think that was a big point for a lot of players, and it, like you said, it showed, right? I think, one of the things that was initially the hardest for a lot of people across the league was playing with no fans, right? Like a lot of athletes will tell you they draw energy from the crowd, they draw energy from the buzz in their arena or the stadium, wherever they're playing. And so like I think that was the hardest part, to like play a game that counts when it feels like it's like a practice scenario, right?
Yeah.
Like
it's like a scrimmage.
Yeah, like a scrimmage, right? Exactly. And so like having your family members there, like they knew they were watching before, but like having them there and actually seeing their faces, seeing their reactions, hearing them right while they're playing, I think that kind of brings the life out of a lot of people, and I think it helped a lot of people kind of overcome different obstacles and push through certain things that like it may have been harder if they didn't have that support system behind them, kind of pushing them as well. So
that just brings me to my next thing that I just thought about, where it's the Olympics. The Olympics just finished right now. There were no fans allowed. It was only, teams and coaches that were allowed to view whatever event it was, right? And that's huge. And we talk about, the mental health side of things. And obviously the big name in the Olympics with mental health this year was Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka, I believe, with tennis. They were two very, I want to say, athletes that were in the forefront of letting the world know that, hey, mental health exists. Mental health is a real thing, right? And Simone, she had, a specific condition that's directly related to gymnastics, which is called the twisties, right? Where she doesn't know where she is in the air, when she's doing all of these turns, which could be very, very, dangerous. Obviously, she could fall, she could get very hurt. But that throws your mental game completely out of the window, right? And and with Naomi Osaka, she also had this issue with like having to be constantly peppered by questions by the media and being on camera and all these things, and that gets to you. If you're a young individual, a young athlete, that you're amazing at what you do, but you're not used to that stimulation, so to speak, right? You're not used to just being peppered with questions all the time, being in front of a camera, recording, like let's say we record this and we're on ESPN 2 seconds later, like that's weird. And a lot of people don't know how to adjust to that. Right. And I feel like those are just like the modern day examples, right? That just happened a few weeks ago of how these pro athletes that are the best at what they do these people still struggle with that. And if the mind, if they're, if the mental side of the game is off, everything is off. They can no longer compete. They can no longer do what they do best, right? And
Right.
that's the biggest thing. That's how it just shows you how powerful it is, for an athlete to have the mental health and to have mental health well-being, right?